So when we evolutionarily went upright, some problems happened. In the quadruped position here, and the arm goes nicely into the shoulder, the thigh goes nicely into the hip, the spine is neutral. As soon as we go like this and extend the hips, we're already putting the spine into a little bit of extension, and this standing position where we live a lot is an extreme. So that combined with the fact that in modern life we spend a lot of time in this position, sitting, which weakens and tightens our hamstrings and our hip flexors here, can create a lot of problems for the spine and or for the legs. So we're going to work on extending the hips. It's my observation that generally almost everyone in this culture needs more strength in the hamstrings and the glutes, which are the hip extensors. So that's what we will focus on today. Of course, we want to continue always to have our core support, because that's the foundation from which everything else gains its support. So we'll start in the neutral backline position. Knees are bent here. This is hip flexion, but this amount of hip flexion allows the spine to be in its neutral position. So let yourself settle here for a moment. And then I would like you to notice any sense of tension in the front of the hips, in the hip crease, and even take your hands and feel in that crease, and notice if you feel any bands of muscles. Sometimes the superficial hip flexors are so overactive that we actually can't relax them. So that's why we can't just stretch them. We do need to stretch them, but we need to have some strength countering that stretch. Because if they're super overactive, these superficial hip flexors are trying to stabilize us, which is not their job. They have a job which is to flex the hip. But if they're holding us up, it's like scaffolding holding a building up. So notice if there's any tightness just as you rest here. And whether you feel those strands of muscles or not, think of your thigh bones dropping down into the socket in the pelvis. And then let the back of the pelvis melt down into the floor and soften through the whole pelvic girdle. Relax the muscles in the belly. Let the lower back come to its relaxed neutral position. And then relax up the length of the spine, making an adjustment if necessary to broaden and flatten the shoulder blades evenly. Orient the head so that the chin is drawn down to the notch of the neck. The back of the neck is long. Use a pillow behind the head if necessary. Continue to sink into gravity. With as much release in the front of the hip as possible. And then we're going to move to the inner core muscles, coming to the pelvic floor first. Feel that sling of muscles anchored on the tailbone, each sit bone and the pubic bone. Picture the diamond that they form. Inhale and exhale. Pull all four of those points in towards the center, shrinking the diamond down. And then relax it. Bring your attention to the transversus, the belt of muscles that moves horizontally all the way around the torso. And exhale, gather that belt snug across the hips, the low belly. Feel it coming from behind and wrapping around the sides, meeting in the front. And then relax it. As we do this inner core isolation, no movement in the pelvis or lower spine. Just stabilize the neutral position. Inhale, prepare for the pelvic floor. And exhale, gather it. Relax with the inhale and prepare for the transversus. And exhale, gently pull that belt snug around the hips. And relax with the inhale, moving the attention back down to the pelvic floor. And exhale, shrink the pelvic floor. And relax. And once again with the belt, use your exhale to wrap it gently around. And then relax. Sink into gravity again. And then notice the front of the hips. If the hip flexors are really tight, you may feel like you're needing to stretch them already here. Because we haven't moved up your spine, we're not going to straighten the legs, but you can actually give yourself some relief by just hugging the knee into the chest for a moment. One leg and then the other. And then once again, relaxing into neutral. Feel the thigh bone. Imagine a waterfall cascading down from the knee, down into the basin of the pelvis, and soften the hip crease as much as possible. Bring the hands, we're going to start with the arms down at the sides. And do some arm lifts, supporting with the inner core. Inhale, float the arms up to the ceiling. And exhale, engage the pelvic floor and the belt. Reach your arms back. Inhale and float the arms up towards the ceiling. And exhale, lower your arms down to your sides. Let everything relax and keep thinking of that cascade of water down the front thighs, keeping the hip crease soft. Inhale, arms float up. And exhale, inner core. Stable lower back and pelvis. And inhale, float the arms up. And relax them back down with the exhale. Soften everything. Broaden the back pockets. Sink the femoral heads down into the front of the pelvis. One more time. Inhale, arms float up. Engage the inner core and reach back. And float the arms up. And then relax your arms down to the sides. And soften in the hip crease. Sink the tailbone down into the mat. Bring the hands behind the head. Inhale, let the ribs flare open. And exhale, unflare the front ribs and reach the back ribs down into the mat. And then inhale again, feel the ribs unflare, opening them wide as you inhale. And exhale, draw them into the center and imprint the back ribs. Once again, inhale, the ribs flare open. And exhale, unflare and imprint the back ribs. Engage your inner core and take a head lift with a neutral spine and lower back down. Again, re-engage inner core, ribs dinning and imprinting, and lift the head. And one more time. Exhale to lift. And inhale to lower. Then bring the hands down. And until you can make a karate chop shape with your hand and set the karate chop along the crease of the hips. We're going to do alternate leg lifts. Just observe with the hand as we do the first one. Engage the inner core. Reach your ribs down around to the left back pocket. And then raise the right foot up off of the mat. And you're going to feel some engagement in the front thigh, or the front hip crease, and lower back down. And re-engage your inner core. Reach your ribs down to your right back pocket. Keep your pelvis still and lift the left side up. And just feel with the hands the muscles of the hip flexors, the bands tightening up. We're going to do it like that one more time. Engage the inner core first. Reach the ribs down to the left back pocket to balance and lift, just observing with the hands. And lower back down. And set the other side, reaching the ribs down to the right back pocket and lift the left foot and lower back down. Let everything release for a moment. I want you to feel the lower back. It's in its neutral curve. Engage your inner core. Find your pelvic floor and your drawstrings, and then tilt the pelvis like you're trying to pull your pubic bone into your belly button. Let the lower back flatten, and then relax. Do that twice more. Inner core first, and then tilt the pelvis, drawing the pubic bone towards the belly button, feeling the lower back move towards flat. Don't insist that it flattens, don't press into your feet, but get that engagement in that direction. And then release. And one more time. And then release. So we're going to work on doing alternate leg lifts without fully relying on the superficial hip flexors. We're going to try to use the psoas. If you have a spondylolisthesis, please do not try to do this. I don't want your psoas tugging on your lower spine. In fact, if you have a spondylolisthesis or any spondylo, ask for help before you start doing these exercises. So there's a deep muscle called the psoas, which connects with the lower 6 vertebrae of the spine and reaches over the front of the pelvis and hooks into the front of the thigh bone. And that also can flex the hip. We're going to try to recruit that muscle and see if the hip flexors can do less. We'll start by engaging the inner core. Let's wrap the ribs down around to each opposite back pocket. Now I want you to picture your leg as though it was a fishing pole. The pole is the thigh, the string part is the calf, or the lower leg and the foot. And instead of lifting your foot up, stay as soft as you can in the hip crease, really use your core muscles, and see if you can tilt the thigh back in the socket and use the hip flexors a little bit less and lower back down. Some of you have actually done this before. I know we've done this in class from time to time. Keeping the hip crease soft, engage the inner core, really stabilize the spine, and then instead of thinking of lifting the foot, think of tilting the thigh back in the socket, relying less on the superficial hip flexor and more on the deep one. Try that a couple times back and forth. Maybe easier on one side or the other. It may be not possible for you at all right now, but the image is still useful. You use the inner core and think of tilting the thigh back in the socket to undercut the superficial hip flexors, trying to use the iliopsoas instead. Humeral heads dropped in. There's your fishing pole, and just tilt it back. Make sure your back is stabilized. You want to make sure you really have your transversus working. One more time. Inner core working. Drop the femoral head into the socket and then tilt the leg back and lower back down. And then the other side. Drop the femoral head and tilt the fishing pole and lower back down. So that's hard. Of course, I don't know how it's going for you, but it's something interesting to think about. And the image may have helped you get in touch with that deeper muscle, even if you couldn't release the superficial hip flexors completely. You might feel a little bit of a different sensation. So it's really deep. As I said, it's attached to the spine. So you may feel a little deep sensation in the hip crease. Okay, we're going to do a couple compound leg lifts. And you can keep working with the hands on the pelvis, being aware of minimizing the automatic reaction of the superficial hip flexors. Engage the inner core. Take your ribs and reach them down to the opposite back pockets. Stabilize the pelvis and float the right foot up. Check in with your back ribs, imprint them and lift the left foot up. And then lower the right. This is hip extension, so you might feel a little lengthening here. And lower the left foot down. Re-engage. Reach the ribs to the opposite back pockets. Keep the pelvis steady as you lift the left foot up first. Make sure you're imprinting as you lift the right. And keep that imprint. Lower the left and lower the right. Now we're going to start with the right and just do half a cycle. Engage the inner core. Reach the ribs down. Take the right foot up. Imprint and lift the left foot up. And we're going to take the arms up to the ceiling. Pull the pubic bone to the belly button to flatten the lower back. Relax the shoulders. And then do the knee circles, rolling the knees around in a circle. Keep the back ribs down. Your arms should be still. Go one circle, one full circle one way, and then reverse it. A lot of hip flexion here, of course, but we're working to eventually be able to get some hip extension without the automatic spine extension that goes with it. So you need to warm up the muscles in around the spine. And then let's put one hand on each knee, hip circles, relax the legs out. I know I say this every time, but this is actually supposed to be an exercise to release the hip flexors. Even though the thighs are in the hip flexion, if you use your arms and not your legs, then the legs get a chance to be in this position with the muscles slack and passive. Just stir the thighs around, keep the power coming in the hands. If you're doing this, then you're using your hips. So I want you to relax the legs and flop them around, only use the arms. And reverse, flop the legs around. And then bring the knees into the chest. Feel your lower back lengthen. We're going to do our pistons and then our 100 to warm up the core a little bit more, and then we can work on more hip extension. So come to your neutral tabletop. Arms down at the sides. Engage the inner core. Wrap the ribs down to the opposite back pockets. Press the hands down as you knit and imprint the ribs. Extend the legs if you like, and then exhale for 5 pulses, and inhale for 5. Exhale, and inhale. Neutral lower back, shoulders dropping down, arms engaged. Inhale. Oblique smile, spreading the waist out. Inhale. Exhale for 5, and inhale. Exhale. The neck is tight, put the head down. Exhale. And one more time. Exhale. And inhale. Knees into the chest. One hand on each knee. Passively draw the knees in close. Let the lower back stretch. And then come to the neutral tabletop. We're going into pistons here. And you're going to feel that when we take the foot down, we're doing some hip extension. Engage the inner core, wrap the ribs around, and then reach down with the right foot. So feel that lengthening at the front of the thigh. Make sure you stay stable in the lower back, and then switch to the other side. If you let the back go with it, you're going to get less of the hip flexion because your spine is also, or hip extension because your spine is also extending. So stabilize the spine and move against it, and then you can feel that lengthening. If you're feeling stable, you can reach even farther down the mat. Make sure the back ribs stay down, neutral lower spine. And next time you put the right foot down, keep it down. And then bring the left foot down and keep it down. Relax. And we're going to take a pelvic lift. If you've got something behind your head, take it out. So now we're going to start working the hip extensors. The buttocks, the gluteals, and the hamstrings, the back of the thighs, are the muscles that do the work of extending the hip. Engage your inner core. We're going to start by rolling, so tilt the pelvis first, pulling pubic bone to belly button. Imprint the back ribs, and then press into the feet. As you press into the feet, you're going to start to feel engagement in the buttocks, the back of the thighs. Come on up. Really use the butt muscles, squeeze them a little bit and see if you can get the hips nice and high. And then roll yourself back down. Now it's morning, some of you might get a little cramp in the hamstring because you haven't used them much today. If so, just give your leg a stretch. If you have that problem also, you could try taking a small ball and squeezing it between your knees as you do the lift. Let's try it again. Engage the inner core. Tilt the pelvis. Imprint the ribs. Press into the feet. Feel the activation in the buttocks and the back of the legs. That's the power. There's your work. And then the stretches in the front of the thighs. Reach your knees away from your head. Use the buttocks. And then roll down. And relax. And once you relax, sink your tailbone, soften the hip crease. And do it one more time. Inner core. Ribs knitting and imprinting, tilting the pelvis, pressing into the feet. You'll be opening at the front of the hip. Use the muscles of the buttocks and the back of the legs. Breathe into that big stretched open front thigh. And roll back down. Remember to imprint, tilt the pelvis. And then relax completely. And soften into gravity. We're going to try some heel slides. Keep your arms relaxed. Engage the inner core. Tilt the pelvis. Let your lower back come flat. And now insist that it stays flat. And slowly slide your right heel away from you. Naturally, after we do this, we're going to feel if you don't engage. But I want you to feel now as you keep engaged, when you extend the hip, you have to really work to keep the lower back flat. And pull it back in. Keep the back flat. And then keep it back and flat and extend the left leg out. Keep flattening the back. Feel the stretch at the front of the thigh. And keep flattening the back and come back. And then relax it. Now, without doing anything, just stretch your leg out. So it's quite a different feeling, right? You don't have the stretch because your back is accommodating it. Bring that one back in. Stretch the left leg out. Feel that, and then bring it back in. Do that again. Engage the inner core. Tilt the pelvis. You can use your obliques, imprint the back ribs to keep the lower back flat and straighten the right leg away. And then keep flattening it. Keep pulling the pubic bone into the belly button. And start to straighten the left leg out away. Lengthen there. It's quite a bit of torque, asking your back to move. And then start to bend the right knee. Keep the back flat. Keep flattening it. Keep pulling the pubic bone into the belly button. And continue to pull pubic bone into the belly button as you bend the left knee. And then relax into neutral. We're going to do that one more time, starting with the left leg. Engage the inner core. Tilt the pelvis. Imprint the ribs. Straighten the left leg out. Keep the back flat. And continue to flatten the back as you straighten the right leg. Keep flattening. Keep pulling pubic bone to belly button. And draw the left knee back in. Foot onto the floor. And flat back as you bring the right leg in. And relax. Let everything sink into the gravity for a moment. Now engage in your neutral. We're going to keep a neutral spine, not going to the intensity of flattening it, but we are going to straighten the leg out without allowing the lower back to change its position at all. Engage the inner core, stabilize around your neutral, keep your neutral and straighten your right leg out in front of you. Then point the toes, continue to stabilize, lift the leg just a hair and externally rotate it. And then lift the right leg up and bring it back down. Good. Keep your pelvis steady. Lift and lower, and lift and lower, lift and lower. One more time. Keep the pelvis steady. Lift and lower. Turn the leg back to parallel. Drop it down onto the floor and drag the heel back in. Neutral spine. Set it up on the other side. You're going to feel some effect there, right? You just worked with those front thigh muscles nice and long. Engage the inner core. Keep the pelvis steady. Don't let the back arch, but do extend the leg straight out. And point the toes. Externally rotate. Keep your pelvis steady. And lift and lower the left leg. Good. Keep the spine steady. Keep the pelvis balanced. Feel the length at the front of the left thigh. And then bring the leg down, heel to the floor, go to parallel. Keep your pelvis stabilized. And bend the knee, come back in. Now, let's flatten the back again. Extend the left leg straight out. Press the back left thigh down into the floor. And then bring your right knee into your chest. The back is still flat. And pull the knee to the breastbone. Feel the front of the thigh stretching. Lower back flattening to the floor. And then relax the hug so you come into a neutral back. So it's no longer flat. Neither is it very arched. It's just its natural arch. Left leg is long but relaxed. We're going to go into the leg circles. Find the inner core. The obliques reaching to the opposite back pockets. Straighten the right leg up. Support the leg. So we're giving the hip flexors a little bit of a break as you flex and point the right foot. Then stay in your point. Check back in with the pelvis so that it's neutral. Stabilize around the neutral. Wrap the ribs around and do 5 leg circles with the right leg. And keep stabilized and reverse. Good. Feel the length on the front of the left thigh. Try to keep that leg parallel. Don't roll it out and keep the back of the thigh reaching towards the mat. And then re-engage your core and keep the back really well stabilized as you lengthen the straight right leg all the way down. Don't let your back arch. As the foot gets closer to the floor, keep stable, extend out long through both legs, and then relax. When you relax, you're going to feel more space come into the lower back. Let the legs flop for a moment. And then back into parallel with the legs. Reset your inner core. Tilt the pelvis. Imprint the back ribs. There's your flattened back. And bring your left knee into the chest. Pull the knee towards the breastbone. Good. You're actively pulling pubic bone to belly button in addition to stretching the knee in with the hands. Feel the front of the right leg. Reaching long, right thigh stretching towards the floor, back thigh stretching down to the floor. And then keep your pelvis neutral, or might come to a neutral pelvis. Move the knee away a little bit. Stabilize around your neutral. Find your core. Support the left leg as you stretch it up. And flex the foot and point the toes. Flex. point, flex, and point. Maintain that point, reset your core, keep the pelvis steady, circle the leg 5 times each direction. Keep the right leg straight and back of the thigh reaching towards the mat as much as possible. And reverse. Keep stabilizing the pelvis. And then reach the leg down towards the floor. The lower the leg gets, the more it's going to want to arch your spine. So stabilize, stabilize, stabilize. Keep it neutral. Keep your ribs pulling down. Keep stabilizing. Once the foot gets to the floor, then relax and notice there's going to be an instant change of the spine as you relax. Let the legs flop, let everything soften. Okay, we're going to turn over onto the stomach. Actually, let's come up to all fours first. Neutral quadruped position, hands under the shoulders, knees under the hip sockets. Neutral spine, so you're not collapsed nor rounded. Engage the inner core and wrap the ribs around, then draw the breastbone forward. Exhale, tuck your toe between the legs. And then bend your elbows and move the hips back towards the heels. Lift up onto all fours. Pull the chest forward. And tuck your tail between your legs. And bend your elbows. Move your hips back to your heels. Feel a stretch in the lowest part of the back. Once again, come forward with the inhale. Bring the breastbone forward. And exhale, tuck the tail between the legs. Bend the elbows. Move the hips back. Take a breath in the child's pose. And then we're going to come all the way out onto the stomach and bring your hands so they're right underneath the front of the hips. You're going to have your hip point right into the center of the palm. And take a moment to settle there. Feel the hip point pressing into the center of the palm. If your neck's not comfortable, you can have a very small pillow or folded cushion underneath your, folded towel underneath the forehead. Let yourself relax. Feel the evenness of the pressing of the hip point into each hand. If it's not even, adjust it so it is. Engage the inner core. Slide the ribs together. And then without changing the weight distribution of the hip point into the palm, and a very small unweight of the right leg. Your thigh might not come over off of the mat. Make sure that you're keeping an even amount of pressure into the hip point on both sides and lower the foot back down, trying to stabilize completely, no shifting. Reset your stabilizing and lift the left foot up just a tiny bit. Think of just unweighting it and floating it up a little bit. Just feel the buttocks and the back of the thighs working. Engage the inner core. Even weight into both palms. Think of reaching your right foot away from the head as you come up. It's really not high. This is not, I'm not asking you to lift your leg as high as you can. I'm asking you to lift the leg, extend the hip without extending the back, which is an unusual proposition. Stabilize the pelvis. Little lift of the left leg and lower back down. Now we're going to add a slight bend of the knee to make the hamstring work more obvious. Engage the inner core. Stabilize the torso. Float float the right leg up. Before we go anywhere else, check that you're still evenly on both knees. Then start to, or even on both hip points, start to bend the right knee. And I want you to notice the back of the thigh. We're not bending too far. You don't have to bend too far to feel the hamstring working. Keep the weight even across the front of the hips. Then straighten the right leg and lower it down. Same thing on the other side. Stay even, stable. Unweight the left leg. And then bend. Not too far. Not too big of a knee bend. We'll do a bigger knee bend later. Now we're concentrating the hamstrings. So hopefully you can feel the big muscle that makes up the meat of the back thigh engage. We're going to do each leg one more time. First stabilize, then unweight, keeping the weight balanced across the pelvis. Small bend of the right knee. Think of aiming your heel towards your sit bone, but you're not going to get anywhere near it really. And lower back down. Last one. Restabilize. Float the left leg up. Bend the knee. It's not a big motion, but see if you can feel the back thigh working. And then release back down. Okay, bring your hands underneath your forehead. Relax the breath. Let the body soften there for a moment. This is passive hip extension. Usually we're working against gravity when our legs are in this position if we're standing. So let the gravity help with the hip extension. Now we're going to bring the arms straight forward, forehead on the floor. Continue to feel the balanced weight at the front of the pelvis. Engage the inner core. Draw your shoulders down your back as you knit your ribs and float the chest and head up. Just the upper torso is lifted. Let's just pay attention for a moment to the shoulders. Draw them down the back. Stay even across the front of the pelvis. And then without letting your weight shift, float the right leg up. Same thing we did before. See if you can feel your buttock and back thigh working more than your right lower back. If not, lower back down even more. Think of your right foot moving far away from the top of the head. And then release. Even pelvis. Re-engage. Knit the ribs and lengthen your left foot away from the top of your head. Float the foot up just a tiny bit. And lower the foot down. And then bring the head down to rest on the floor. Let everything relax. Bring the arms down by the sides. Now we're going to have the spinal extensors working with the hip extensors because we'll lift everything up. Then I just want you to notice the difference in the feeling of the lower back. Engage the inner core, knit the ribs in. Keep the legs as close together as you can and lift everything up. Head, arms, chest, legs up and lower back down. Twice more. Engage the core. And lift up. See if you can feel that your buttocks and back thighs are working. Your hands are down there so you can feel in the back of the thighs. It should feel pretty firm. And lower back down. But you'll also notice muscles in the lower back are getting short. One more time. So if you put your hands on your lower back, you're going to feel that engagement there as well. And lower back down. And move into a child's pose. And now we're going to turn on to the left side. Working the clamshells with the hip flexion in 3 different variations. With the knees bent so that the knees and feet are at the front of the mat. That's called 90-degree flexion. You can see that 90-degree relationship between the front thigh and the torso. Actually, it's the back of the thigh that counts here. You'll see why when we go to the 45. Engage your inner core. Keep the pelvis steady. And we're going to roll the thigh out of the socket. So we're in the buttock now, but now we're in the external rotators. Different feeling than the gluteals. Let's just do 5 slow ones. So now we decrease the hip flexion, increase the hip extension. This is called 45-degree hip flexion. Engage the inner core, stabilize the pelvis, and roll the right thigh out in the socket. Remember, we want to concentrate on the top buttock doing the work. Try not to brace with the bottom. And then relax. And now move to 0 degrees of hip flexion. We're in as close to full extension as you can get. You may not be able to get your knees directly underneath you. So if the hip flexors are really tight, your knees will be a little bit forward. That's fine. Engage the inner core. And then we're going to roll out. And now you've got a whole, you have the hip flexors and, the hip extensors and the external rotators working together. That's why you feel more of the buttock muscles engaging. And then let's open all the way out, legs straight. So notice if you go into full hip extension, like your feet are directly underneath you, for one thing it's a little hard to keep the balance, but that's not the problem here. The thing that we're trying to avoid is that the lower back is engaged when you get to that much a hip extension. So we're moving the legs just a tiny bit forward. So trying to have a neutral lower back, but relaxed as possible in the spinal erectors of the lower spine. Engage the inner core. Take an organ lift, lifting the internal organs up off of the mat, firm in the waist. Now, even though your legs aren't fully underneath you, we are in foot and hip extension here. So even as we lift and lower, we're getting some, we're exercising in this lengthened position. Come halfway down and then do 5 circles. And you can notice here you're going a little bit into more flexion and then into a little bit more extension. When you bring the leg up and over, see if you can feel the buttock working, and then reverse it. This time when you pull the leg back, you're going to feel the buttock working a little bit. And let's do the bottom leg, lift and lower 5 times. And then I want you to bring both legs down and relax everything for a moment. We're going to do the internal, external. I really want you to be careful when you roll the leg in and reach down that you don't bend your ankle. So you're really working the hip extension when we reach the foot behind you and letting that hip extension go all the way down into the front of the ankle. So we start by externally rotating the leg, flexing the foot, reaching the heel towards the front, then point the toe, roll in, and now here's your hip extension. You should feel stretch in the front thigh as you reach that right toe down towards the floor behind you. Lift up, roll out, reach the heel to the front, lift up, point, roll in, and reach back. So the buttocks working. And roll out, heel front, roll in, point, lengthen the front thigh, twice more. And on this last one, I want you to keep the leg extended and rolled in, and then pulse 5 times. And then bring the leg back to rest. Now move your hand so it's on the waist and you can wrap your thumb around to feel your lower back. Engage your inner core. Exhale, take an organ lift and raise just the top leg up. Now as we go forward and back, I want to emphasize hip extension but not spine extension. To pull the ribs together, start to move the leg behind you. But be careful that you're not letting your lower back either engage and or really arch. And then bring the leg forward. Keep the pelvis still. Without finding extra engagement in the lower back, extend the hip. You do want to use your right buttock and come forward. Feel the length in the front of the hip without moving the spine. So you may feel your internal obliques if your thumbs up high, but if you get down near the spine, we're going to try to do the motion in the leg without extending or without contracting the muscles around the spine. When you've done that 5 times, rest the leg down. Let's drop the right knee to the front, left hand onto the right knee, and roll out into a twist. Reach the right arm out to the side. Breathe into the right side. Give the right buttock a stretch. Then go to the back. Just bring the right knee into the chest and feel your left leg reaching down into the mat. And then bring the left leg in, hug both knees. And turn over onto your right side. On the right side with the knees bent, now you do bring angle at the hip. Stabilize the pelvis, find the inner core in your belt. And 5 times. Slowly roll the thigh out in the socket. Keep the pelvis still. Now you may notice here also that those superficial hip flexors try to really get in on the act. Concentrate on the back. If you're feeling a lot of tension in the front hip, you can think of pushing your knee a little forward and then doing your external rotation. When you're done with 5 of those, open out the front of the hip a little bit more. Relax into that neutral position for a moment, then engage and feel the front of the hip, and just notice as you roll the thigh out in the socket, if you feel a lot of engagement, especially on the outermost part of the hip crease, push your left knee forward a little bit and then do your roll and see if you can undercut it. Once you're done with 5 of those, open out the front of the hip. And re-engage the core. And roll the thigh out in the socket. As you roll the thigh out in the socket, now you're going to feel a lot more going on in the buttock because you've got the hip external rotators and the hip extensors going. And then bring both legs straight. With just a little forward so you feel no tension in the lower back. Engage the inner core and lift and lower the top leg. Feel the length in the front of the right and left thigh. Steady the pelvis. On the last one, come partway down and circle. And notice the portion of the circle when your leg is going back. Feel the buttock increase in its activity as you go behind you. Feel that that's giving you length in the front of the thigh. 5 times one way and then 5 the other. And then steady that leg, and let's take the lower leg lifts 5 times. And then we're going to work with the external and internal rotation. Roll the leg out in the socket, flex the foot, bring the heel down to the front. Now roll in, try not to bend at your ankle, and stretch down. Feel the stretch down the whole front of the leg from the thigh to the ankle. External rotation, heel front. Internal rotation, hip extension as you bring the toe towards the floor behind you. Roll out, heel front, roll in, Reach long through the front thighs, go back and down. Twice more. Now keep the internal rotation, the front thigh long in 5 pulses. And then lower the leg down, rest for a moment. Re-engage. We're going to place the thumb down near the spine, lower spine. Find your organ lift, raise the top leg, and then without pumping up the muscles in the lower spine, but using your buttock and hamstring instead, reach the leg behind you and bring it forward again. And reach back. Keep reaching the toes away from the top of the head. Come forward a little bit. Stretch the front of the thigh. And forward. Twice more. Reach your foot away from your head. And then relax. Bring the left knee to the floor in front of you. Use your right hand on your left knee. Roll the upper body out. Left arm where it's comfortable. Give the left hip a stretch. And then back into the center, knees into the chest for a moment. Rock side to side on the back of the pelvis. Bring both feet down. Engage the inner core, tilt the pelvis, and print the back ribs. Back is flat. And extend the left leg straight out. Keep the back flat, extend the right leg straight out. Keep the back flat, reach the arms up to the ceiling and back to the floor behind you. Flatten the whole spine down. And relax. Flex the feet back, squeeze the toes, point the feet, fan the toes out, flex them back. Squeeze, point, fan, flex. One more like that, squeeze, point, fan, flex. Keep your toes open. Stretch out with the ball of the feet. Squeeze the toes and pull back. Open. Reach out through the ball of the foot. Squeeze the toes and pull back. One more time. And then relax. Take an inhale. Feel that exaggerated lower back curve. As you exhale, engage the inner core. Tilt the pelvis and imprint the ribs. Flatten the spine down. Reach your back thighs down towards the mat at the same time you're reaching the lower back down. And then relax. Keep the back of the pelvis level and we'll side bend. Move the legs to the left, the upper body to the left. Reach down with the right hip and the right back ribs. Right ankle over the left. Hold the right wrist. Keep stretching down with the back of the pelvis and the back of the right rib cage. Try reaching your right toes away from your right armpit. And then come back into the center. Just relax for a moment. Keep the back of the body even on the mat. Walk the feet to the right. The upper body to the right, reach down with the right hip, the right rib cage, left ankle over the right, hold the left wrist. Keep reaching your left hip and your left ribs down. And try pointing the left toes away from the left armpit. Really finding length in the front of the body. Release back into the center. Bring the hands behind the head. Take a relaxed inhale. So notice as you do nothing, your lower back is quite extended, your ribs are flaring. We're going to flatten the spine down, engaging the inner core, tilting the pelvis, imprinting the back ribs, scooping the belly in, and then lift the head. Press the belly button to the spine, keep your legs parallel, reach out through the toes, keep pulling the pubic bone into the belly button and pulling the lower back down to the mat. And then release, let it go. Again, inner core, tilt the pelvis, imprint the ribs, scoop the belly in, lower back is flattening, thighs are parallel, press down with the belly button, lengthen your feet away from your head, and then release. One more time. Lower back is flat, front thighs are straight, scoop the belly in, and roll down. Bring the knees into the chest for a moment, and then up onto all fours. And stabilize in your neutral spine here. Keep the pelvis even, and keeping the right foot on the floor, straighten the right leg. So there's hip extension in the right leg without spinal extension. Re-engage your ribs, and then we're going to start to lift the right leg up. Now I want you to notice you feel the buttock working more. You're going to feel a little bit of lower back work, that's fine, but don't let it tilt the pelvis. Stay in a neutral spine. And then bend that right knee and reach up with the top of the foot towards the ceiling. Notice the buttock. And then extend the leg out again. Lower the foot to the floor. Pull your knee underneath you without letting the pelvis move. Relax in neutral. Re-engage. Steady the lower spine. Slide the left leg out away from you. Pull the ribs in. Lift the left leg up. Try not to overarch the lower back. Keep your pelvis steady. Then bend at the knee. And pump the foot towards the ceiling 5 times. Notice the buttock. And straighten the leg out. Balance the pelvis. Stretch your foot down to the mat and pull the knee underneath you, keeping the pelvis steady. And bring your hips back to your heels. Then come up to stand on your knees. Engage the inner core. Feel the pelvic floor lift up, the belt wrap around, the ribs reach to the opposite back pockets. Bring the right foot forward so that the knee and the ankle are in line. And then pull pubic bone to belly button. Tuck your tail underneath and feel the length in the front of the left thigh. Release. So notice the way that flexing the lower spine helps you to find some extension in the front of the thigh. And release. One more time. Remember your inner core is engaged, and then you're tucking the tail, so lengthening the front left thigh. Release. Bring the right knee back underneath you. Stand tall. And then the left foot comes forward. Left ankle in line with the knee. Organize your inner core support, wrap the ribs, and then tilt the tail between your legs, tuck the pelvis, lengthen the lower spine, lengthen the front of the right thigh. And release. And again, set the core first, tuck the tail. Release. One more time. And release. Now I want you to keep that left knee bent. Bend forward with your hands and then step into a standing forward bend. Relax down over the legs for a moment. And easy roll up, stand tall. So this is full hip extension when we stand. Not full, this is called neutral hip extension when we stand. And we can also work in a standing position, trying to keep as even as we can on the pelvis and reach the leg back behind. Try that with each foot. And just bend the knees slightly, slide the hands down, relax the back, and stand up tall again. Lengthen up through the crown, find your core support, pull the arms out in the sockets, open the chest, and then relax. And hopefully now you're standing at your full height. This opening of the front thighs is part of getting us up to our full height. Thanks for being here. Enjoy the beautiful day and happy open hips. Okay. Thank you. Hey, Renata, glad you made it. Okay, bye everybody.